everybody. I'm Kristine. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My home group is BYOC, and it's out of New York, like you just said. And my sober date is September 2nd, 2018. And I'm excited to get to share with you today, and I'm excited about the topic, which is, can God be good, orderly direction? Right, this acronym that some humans have given to our all-powerful creator and our disease to maybe make it more, I don't know. I'm not sure why. I don't know why they did it, but I will tell you this. You know, I've had a lot of experience in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had a lot of experience trying to stay sober on what could pose as good, orderly direction, you know, and it never sufficed. You know, there were some times where I did get a few years here, a few years there, but it was not what this program is about, and it's not what it's given me today, and it certainly wasn't enough to give me a spiritual experience, which is exactly what I need as a real alcoholic to combat my alcoholism. You know, I'm definitely going to refer to my experience as well as to the book. You know, but I will tell you this, you know, I don't always have access to good, orderly direction, right? Because even today, I'm coming here to speak. So maybe some good, orderly direction for speaking on this topic might be to sit down and prepare and look things up, right? But I don't do that, right? But what do I do have access to? I do always have access to this power. So what I can do, and what I did do, is to, you know, pray to God, ask God, you know, help me to share the truth, you know, help me to help somebody else. Please speak through me in the way that you want to speak through me. You know, give me some humility and help me to remember, you know, the spots in the book of where to share. And then I meditate, you know, and I do this stuff that I've been taught, you know, through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous as outlined in the book. And I just want to say, you know, I want to preface it also by saying, you know, there are good directions, right? There are good directions that we get in Alcoholics Anonymous. However, you know, this creator, this being, this God that has created us, you know, or the world or humans, you know, like I can't create myself. Right? The createe can't be the creator. And, you know, this good orderly direction has nothing to do with this being. You know, and it's not a bad idea to have good orderly direction, but the problem is that, like many other things in Alcoholics Anonymous, things get misconstrued, things get passed down. You know, we have a ton of things being passed down in Alcoholics Anonymous that are not part of Alcoholics Anonymous, that have, you know, been infiltrated because of detoxes or rehabs or all sorts of things that are great, you know, for people to get sober if that works, but it's not our program, right? We don't start adopting other programs. You know, we have traditions, we have a program, and if we're members, you know, we have a responsibility also to uphold these things, right? I mean, even in our traditions, right, it talks about like a group conscience with this loving God. It's all over, you know, and then there is a solution. I'm just going to start. You know, 3 of the 4 facts in this chapter are super important. You know, it starts off on the first page. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries for those who suffer from alcoholism. Like, what happens when all of a sudden we're not agreeing? What happens when we don't have a common solution? You know, instead of brotherly and harmonious action, you know, what happens when there's chaos? What does that do for the alcoholic who's coming in, who can't get sober, who's getting all these mixed messages and doesn't know exactly what to do, and maybe is getting it from someone who looks like a really cool sponsor, right? Because that was my experience. You know, I've had this experience with a sponsor who gave me good, orderly direction, or attempted to give me good, orderly direction. And I know today that, her program was not based in a God. And I have factual experiences with that to know this is true. I mean, we were sitting at a big book meeting one time, and I remember, I don't know what chapter we were in, but it was talking about God, right? And it got to a woman who was talking about what I'm talking about, right? She knew what the program was about. And my sponsor was arguing with her, saying, oh, she doesn't have to believe in a God. Like, she doesn't need that about me, like trying to defend me, right? But what happened to me? I drink again because I'm a real alcoholic. I need a spiritual experience. I'm that alcoholic who needs a God, right? I cannot stay sober on these things, right? It says I could have moral or philosophical convictions galore, but they're not enough, right? The needed power was not there. I had to find a power by which I could live, right? This power was God. And it's not everybody, right? In all these years that I've been coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, it wasn't like there wasn't anyone telling the truth. There wasn't anyone sharing the program. There were plenty of people. And I thank God for the people who didn't care about my feelings, who told me the truth regardless. They didn't change the message. Nobody's going to get me drunk, just like nobody's going to get me sober, right? I don't have to tell somebody, somebody who has a problem with God, it's doing me no good to try to say, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. It is a big deal. That's what our whole program is about, right? This whole program, Alcoholics Anonymous, is a spiritual program. This is a program that's about getting to God, that's going to keep us sober. There's plenty of other programs out there, and if somebody doesn't want this, that's okay, right? That's okay. I can say, well, maybe you might want to try something else. And I don't change the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. The other two facts on page 25, it says, and it's very clear, it says the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. Like, nowhere is that like, oh, good orderly direction has entered into my heart. That's not keeping me sober. Even in, forget what I was reading before. It was a doctor's opinion. And it's talking about, like, we know it. It's all over the book, right? It's in We Agnostic, the doctor's opinion, all over he, him, and it's not a person, but it's not, and the other thing is, I know sometimes I get all over the place, but the other thing is my good orderly direction might not be your good orderly direction, right? Just the fact that we live in different countries means that, like, our logic might not even be the same, right? Like, what's your idea of good? What's somebody else's idea of good? It might not be the same, and it might not need to be the same. I remember, like, these are the kinds of things I would hear, from my sponsor. Oh God, now that I think I need to keep these on. I see you guys better. She would tell me, like, do the next right thing, right? But I don't do the next right thing, because as an alcoholic, I'm always going to do the next wrong thing. Before I go through this work, maybe today I can have good orderly direction, right? Because I get it from God, and I can get these things from God. But do the inconvenient thing. I'm an alcoholic who's always going to drink. Right? So you're telling me when I stumble into Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And I've had a million reasons to stop drinking, right? That are a lot more motivating, right, than doing the next right thing, right? I'm coming in off a million different like, I have every reason not to drink. And that is not powerful enough to keep me from a drink. you know, when I came in, you know, all these things, I don't know, like I just couldn't do it, right? I just couldn't get it, because I remember trying to do everything that everyone was telling me, you know, and I wasn't doing everything, but I was trying. You know, I did want to stop. You know, when I end up in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's not because things are good out there. And then I come in and it's like, you know, I'm trying, I'm failing and I'm failing. And, you know, it gets to the point where it's like, it's almost 20 years. And it's like, am I ever going to get this thing? Like, because I was a person who was never going to get it. You know, that's who I was. I was the girl who was never going to get it. In fact, I went to a meeting last night, and it's actually called Singleness of Purpose. And funny enough, I didn't really like this meeting back, you know, when I was coming, because they had a singleness of purpose, right? Their job was to help the alcoholic who is still suffering. You know, their job was to, you know, give this program as it's laid out. And they were following these traditions. And I was with my friend Pete, who some of you know. And I heard the chairperson going up to Pete and talking about like needing a speaker. You know, like the incoming group didn't show up. And I kind of heard like Pete saying, "Oh, you should, you know, ask Christy too." That's what they call me there, because I've been going there since I was like a teenager. I could hear the guy say something to the effect of like, "Does she have any time?" Right? Does she even have any time? Because I was the person who was in and out all the time. And Pete said whatever he said. And then, you know, we got to speak, and I got to share like a completely different human, you know, a human that might as well had an exorcism, because there was nothing the same about me, you know, and I got to share, you know, what happened. I got to share what happens when you go through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and you get to this power that can keep you sober, and it changes everything about your life, right? Like there is nothing the same. And I was talking about how, you know, for 42 years or 41 years, I was the same person in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, sober or drunk, the same selfish person living in fear, you know, always some sort of sense of disease or discomfort, you know, not comfortable in my own skin, maybe not drinking, but not okay with it. You know, like, of course, look, being sober looks better, right? Like being sober looks better on me. Like there's no confusion about that. You know, but that's not enough to keep me sober, you know, and that's not enough to change who I am. And certainly, you know, like all these things, going to meetings, like, I don't know what you want to even give to this name, Good Orderly Direction, you know, but all of those things were not enough, or didn't even come close to what I needed to have this psychic change. Now, it tells us in working with others right away, you know, present this program, like tell them about God. You know, we don't have to tell them, I'm not going to tell somebody about my God, right? Because that's the other thing. I don't try to, I'm not here to, what's the word? Convert anyone or get them to believe, you know, in a God that I believe in, or practice, you know, a religion that I might practice, or have any of the same beliefs that I have. But I'm definitely going to tell them exactly how I got sober, which is from this all-powerful and all-loving God. You know, when Abby goes to Bill, right, Abby tells Bill right away, right, I've got religion. Abby doesn't care. He's not saying, oh, let me not hurt his feelings, right? Because this is what Abby did. What did you do to stop drinking? Abby got religion. He got God, right? Bill didn't like it. Too bad, Bill. Like, too bad. Find your own conception. You know, like, if you don't like it, too bad. Maybe you're not done drinking. Maybe you didn't have enough. Maybe you want to try a different way. You know, this is what we have here. This is what we have to offer. This is what works for us. And this is what I have a responsibility to pass on. You know, I have a responsibility to pass on this program as it is and as it was designed originally. because, change something here, change something there, that what's going to happen? It's already happening. The same amount of people aren't getting sober. Good orderly direction makes me think of, just standing out on this page, self-knowledge, right? That's self-knowledge. Bill drank again. I drank again. The guys in the chapters and more about alcoholism, they drank again. Maybe many of you drank again. That's not enough. I can go to 3 million meetings, and I always say this, right? I can also listen to like 1 million speaker tapes, right? I can go where I think all the greatest speakers are going to go, and hang out with all you cool people who are going to all these great meetings. But unless I have my own experience, unless I have an experience through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, have a psychic change, and get to this God who has the power, as a real alcoholic, I'm good as drunk again. And I say that I'm a recovered alcoholic, because I am. But I also say that there's no confusion that I believe I could drink again if I stopped doing this. This program is laid out very specifically for me to do what it says on a daily basis, over and over again, every single day. So there's no confusion in my mind that if I stop, I'll drink again. I know that, I believe that. And, it says here in Bill's story, God had done for him what he could not do for himself. And I'm not one of these people who know like how many times it says God in the book. I'm pretty good with the book, but I'm definitely not there. By the time we get to step 3, this is really, I'm in Bill's story right now, and it's talking about Bill in the hospital, right? He's still in the hospital. There I humbly offered myself to God, as I then understood him, to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. His care and direction. Not my sponsor's care and direction. Not my support group, not my home group, not my friends, not a human, not their direction. They might mean well, but do they really know what I need? No, I want to go, let me go to the source who has the owner's manual, right? Who wrote the owner's manual about me, who knows what I need. I admitted for the first time that of myself, I was nothing, and that without him, I was lost. If I think that I can follow these good orderly directions, right? Then I'm saying I can do this, right? I have the power to do this. And then it's, negating God. All of a sudden I'm saying, I don't need you, God, which means I'm not powerless, right? And that if I'm not powerless over alcohol, then, maybe I'm not an alcoholic, because there are people who don't have to do this. And there's people all over Alcoholics Anonymous that don't have to do this. Hard drinkers don't necessarily have to do what I have to do as a real alcoholic. It says that if something, sufficient enough happens in their life, they can stop or moderate, right? Which means that they can stop or moderate on, going to meetings, or just, maybe doing some service, or trying to, behave a little differently. They don't have to have a psychic change, right? And it's very dangerous when hard drinkers sponsor real alcoholics, because what worked for the hard drinker is not going to work for the real alcoholic. And the hard drinker is not armed with the facts to even help a real alcoholic, and therefore it becomes frothy emotional appeal, right? All this stuff from their mouths are frothy emotional appeal to the real alcoholic. My sponsor, who was trying to help me with good orderly direction, I don't even think she was an alcoholic. I think she was just a drug addict. Not just, but I'm just saying it's different. It's different. I know what I am. It's so important to know what we are. I'm a real alcoholic who did a hell of a lot of different kinds of drugs, but I am not an addict. I was able to put every single drugged down, and never think that it was going to be different, right? I never thought, I didn't have the mental obsession. I might have had like some physical allergy, while I was taking, specific things at different points in my life. But once I stopped, I stopped. There was no confusion, no confusion. I never thought, it's probably a good idea for you to, sniff a bunch of cocaine, or maybe like smoke a little bit of crack, or even to start smoking pot again, right? I've never had that thought. It just doesn't come to me. But alcohol, that came to me on and off for 20 years. You've been sober a while. You're a teacher. Look at you, what you're doing athletically. Like, you're not an alcoholic. You can have a drink. You can drink like them. You're just like them. You could drink like them, right? It talks in my voice. My alcoholism, this mental obsession, speaks to me in my own voice, making it very cunning, very powerful, and very insidious. And I will believe it every single time. The absolute only thing that has ever come between me and that thought is God. Straight up, the power of God, the infinite power, that I get to from this book. And I get this God consciousness, right? I get access to this power, because if you think about it, the steps have the word God in them. But if I go through this book academically, which I have done in the past, and I follow along, but I don't really come to believe in a power greater than myself, because I think that I know so much. So I'm still the power. My reason, my thinking, it's still the power. And I don't really, I say the prayer, right? I say the prayer in the third step, but I don't really turn my life over to this God, because I don't even know what it is, right? It's like something out there, right? That I've been like kind of taught as a kid growing up. I didn't have an issue. I'm not one of these people, some of these people do. They like come in with, this negative view of God. It was just something out there. And then I go through the rest of the steps. And then the rest of the steps become like therapy. I do a 4-step. I can do all this stuff. And it's like that moral psychology, that they knew that we needed, right? So knew we needed moral psychology. He knew that. But there was this difference, right? They were doing this moral psychology, and some of these alcoholics were getting and staying sober, and some of these alcoholics were getting drunk. And it was like, well, what's going on? Why are some of them getting drunk? And they couldn't figure out like this application, right? They said they needed something outside of their synthetic knowledge, right? Their scientific knowledge, their man-made knowledge. That we needed this power. He starts to allude to the power right in the doctor's opinion. So if I'm going through the steps without it, it's just that moral psychology. And what would happen is I would get to this 12th step, I'd get to this place a whole bunch of times, but by the time I was on 10, 11, and 12, it's so important. Like, those are based in God. Those are assuming I have a working relationship with a God. So when I get to those and I have no God, I'm not really doing them, right? I'm saying I kind of did my steps, right? I'm done. I have nothing to pass on. I have no relationship to build on, in 11, because I don't have one to begin with. So I've gone through it, and I did that probably, I don't know, maybe at least 4 times. I've been through all the steps, without having a psychic change, which is why it's paramount, and I know they use the word paramount in the book. I'm not sure exactly where, but it's paramount that I get this relationship and that I get it early, right? Because it says how it works, right? It says that the ABCs and how it works. It says, before I move on, I need to have these things, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. Fine, right? That probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, and that God could and would if he were sought. Being convinced we were at step 3. So, if I'm not convinced, I'm not at step 3. I'm just not there, and maybe I don't think I'm powerless. And for me, what happened is I needed to drink again. I needed to drink again all those times, right? So that my alcoholism could beat me into submission. Because what I need to do as an alcoholic is submit to this God, right? And too bad if I don't like it, right? Like, too bad. Like, was my life working for me? Like, is your life that much better? Like, how are you living? You know what I mean? You have such a problem, Kristine, with what we're telling you and the God you're supposed to get in this program. Then, what's the alternative? Because if it's so great out there, how did you end up in here? Maybe you don't know, right? Because alcoholics, we know, I'll speak for myself, this stubborn, self-centered, hard-headed, knucklehead alcoholic thinks she knows everything, right? And I need to be told, like, maybe you don't, right? Like, maybe you don't, because look at the proof. We're over here, we're sober, and we're happy. But the great thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is that it's about love and tolerance, right? I'm not here to criticize. I'm not here to look down on an alcoholic unless I'm helping an alcoholic up, right? So when I say all these things, right, I need to also present them when I'm maybe speaking at a beginner's meeting. It's attraction, right? It's attraction rather than promotion. It's sharing my truth, sharing the experience. It's sharing, the program of what's here. That's so important. So I don't need, right, I'm not cracking a whip. I'm no better, right? I am a drunk. I'm an alcoholic drunk who could not stop drinking, who could not deal with her daily life, who was walking around, in a 40-year-old body acting like a teenager. So who am I? Right? So I do believe in the fact that, right, I tell the truth, but I also do it in a way, where I'm kind, right? I'm kind. I'm considerate. I'm not better, right? If I have what does it say? With pride, there's always a fall, right? Like, if I'm living in pride, the fall is coming. Because I did think I knew things at some point, and when you're an alcoholic who's sober and thinks she knows everything, and the carpet gets pulled from underneath because, by her own alcoholism, if I'm praying for humility, I'm going to get it, one way or another. And it might not always be pretty, but as long as it comes. So let's see. But I do want, this good orderly direction. So I go through these steps, right? And I start to be able to act rightly. I start to be able to follow directions. And the only way that I can start following these directions is when I do an actual step 4 and 5 and move on with 6 and 7 with having done a full 3rd step where, I've abandoned myself to God, right? And now when I first do it, it didn't look, right? Even when I went through the steps this time, my relationship has grown, with this God. It's become 24/7. When I was going through it, it was, a constant, I had to pray, like, God, I don't know who you are, where you are. They tell me you're deep down within me, help me to find you. That's how it started. But it was still based in this God. I might not have known who it was or what was going on, but it was based in God. And then by the time I do a 5th step, I'm asking God to remove this stuff. I'm sharing it with another human, right? And I hope that this other human is not giving me good orderly direction and telling me how I should be living my life and what I did wrong, right? Like, the role of the person listening to the 5th step is to listen to the 5th step, right? I'm hoping that another alcoholic who hasn't really managed their life well is not trying to tell me how to manage mine. Right? That they're telling me that, like, you're going to go on, God's going to do this. God's going to remove this stuff. You have to pray for the willingness for God to remove it. Right? You're going to have to give him the good and bad. Right? A human's not going to get to decide what is the good that should be removed and what is the bad. You know, I give this all to God. Right? And then he starts giving me removing some things and helping me to deal with some things. And then I start to have, like, what we could call maybe some good orderly direction. You know, I can start to show up for work on time. I can start to stop calling in sick, because I would do that sober or drunk. You know, I can start to make better decisions when it comes to relationships. I can start to maybe make some of these things which are called, you know, boundaries or whatever. You know, I can start to have some good orderly direction in the hardest things for this alcoholic, which are food, finance, and romance. You know, and because I get it from God, though, right? They're just, you know, it's just two totally separate things. You know, and I was sharing on a meeting the other day, because I had the topic in my head, you know, and I made the point, like, oh, it's cute. You know, like, that's cute, good orderly direction, but it has nothing to do with it. You know, it's not God, right? And it doesn't work in other languages. You know, it just doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work for Allah. It doesn't work for Yahweh. You know, it doesn't work for Jehovah. It doesn't work for anything else, right? So it's clearly made by an English speaker who just decided to come up with something cute, right? Something cute that could kill alcoholics. Right? So it's not so cute. Not so cute when we look at the repercussions. You know, like, gift of desperation, right? Like, yeah, it's good. We get desperate. We find out. They're not the same thing, though. Right? They're not the same thing. So somewhere along the line, some people who didn't believe in God decided that, okay, it's just good orderly direction. But it's not. It's not just good orderly direction. They're two totally separate things. Right? They're not even close to being the same. And I mean, God we're talking about is going back, I don't know, how long ago was Moses? 5,000 years ago? I don't know. Don't quote me on that stuff. But I'm saying it was a long time. You know, this idea of God. What do you think God thinks of, like, people just calling him good orderly direction? I mean, he's probably insulted. You know, but he loves us, right? God loves us. Because God doesn't need me. God doesn't need me. God created me. God will love me, but he does not need me. I need God. You know, I need God. And as a real alcoholic, my sobriety 100% depends on this relationship with this God. You know, and as a sponsor, as someone who takes people through the book, my job is to get them to this power. To do whatever I can for them to be able to access this power, you know, by reading exactly what's in this book, you know, and when we get to the chapter, like, we agnostic, where it says, you know, maybe you need to put this stuff on the shelf, right? It says, put all of your prejudice, put all of your doubt, put all of this stuff aside, and just put it on the shelf. You know, and just try and be open-minded. So it tells us honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness are indispensable. I have to have them. They're not optional. It's not optional for me to, like, be willing or unwilling, or open-minded or closed-minded. If I'm closed-minded to this idea of God, it's not going to work if I'm a real alcoholic. You know, I'm not sure that every single person on this screen today is a real alcoholic, because I had to find out, you know, and that you can find out by reading the doctor's opinion, by reading the chapter more about alcoholism, you know, and sitting with someone who is armed with the facts and can help you to identify whether you are or you aren't. You know, because it tells us also the other fact is that there's going to be those times, like, it's not going to come into my mind. I'm just going to drink. There was a time when I was sober, and we had a women's big book meeting at my house. It's my parents' house. I was, I think, in my 20s. And we had the meeting. So I was at a meeting. My sponsor was there. I wanted to go out. I wanted to go to the city because there was some cool party and some cool people were going to be there. And I really wanted to go. And I spoke to my sponsor about it. And I was going to take another alcoholic with me, and I did. And I get to this party, and I have my alcoholic, a sober friend. I just had a meeting. I spoke to my sponsor, and I'm uncomfortable, right? I'm uncomfortable because I'm seeing these people, right? And these girls, like, they're pretty, and they look really good. And I feel like I'm not in their league, and I'm uncomfortable, and I'm insecure, which means I'm fearful, right? I'm in fear, and I'm selfish because what? I have this self-centered fear. I'm self-absorbed. I'm not good enough, right? I'm in all of my alcoholic traits, selfishness, self-centeredness. Now, it tells us very clearly in the book that unless I've had a spiritual experience, I don't even belong going, right? The only time where it says I should be going is once I've had, this spiritual experience. And then it tells me only go if you're on solid spiritual ground. And if not, go work with another alcoholic. But what about the alcoholic who hasn't had a spiritual experience? My business was to stay home. It had nothing to do with meetings or sponsors or bringing someone with me. None of that. Because it didn't keep me sober. Because as soon as someone said, do you want a drink? I said, yeah, I want a Johnny Walker Black on the rocks. And then I drank it. Just like that. Because that was the only thing that was going to work in that moment. And I've had hundreds of those. Because I've had so many relapses. I couldn't even get a year sober. It took me years to get a year sober. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 30 days again, 60, over and over, chip after chip, chip after chip, meetings every day, sponsor, call your sponsor every day, meet her at the gym. All of these things I tried to do, always drinking again. Every single time, always drinking again. What I have now today is the experience of 20 years of not having God in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous and drinking. And then all of a sudden coming in, 4 years ago. And it took me a little while. I stayed sober for a year, pretty miserable. I was going to meetings. I was reading the book. I was attempting to do the steps. I was doing everything I always did. All the things that didn't work. And with one foot in the door, one foot out the door. One foot in the door, one foot out the door. And at this time, I had finally been convinced. I knew at this point I was an alcoholic because I was trying to deny it for all these other years. I was trying to control it and deny it and manage it and figure out why I wasn't like you guys. And now I was convinced. I was convinced I was an alcoholic. I had step one, but I didn't have anything else, and the world shut down. And I was found, and I was alone in this room, and I got on this Zoom and I saw these people, who had something I hadn't got. They had something in their eyes, they had something different. They were happy. They were sober. They were inviting. I was attracted. I was attracted to it. Nobody was promoting anything. Nobody was trying to do it. Hey, why don't we do the steps? Why don't we go through the book? And it was read to me, and people went through it line by line and explained it. And I understood for the very first time what it meant to be an alcoholic, what it meant to have a physical allergy, what it meant to have this, this mental obsession, why I was always going to have this pilot light. While I sit here today, I have this little pilot light, right, of alcoholism in me. Like the stove, you turn it on, poof, you get a flame. All you got to do, give me a little alcohol, give me a sip. Sets it off, sets off the allergy. No matter how long I'm sober, 40 years from now, pilot light's still there, just as strong. Same thing will happen. Why I had this mental obsession, why this was, I kept believing it. Because that's part of my disease. I have a mental illness, a physical illness, and a mental illness, where my brain is not right. I'm sick in the head. It's a mental illness too. And then, and having understood that and moving on, and being taught exactly what I needed to do. And it felt like, okay, like they know what they're talking about. They know what they're talking about and they're sober. And then, and how could I not? Like they're presenting this bad, like what do I have to lose? What do I have to lose? To just put it on the side and believe what they're telling me. At least try it. Even if I don't believe it, just try it. And I tried it. And I did it. And it worked. And I have not thought about wanting a drink since I had a spiritual experience. Like it just had not come into my mind a single time. Not a single time. And I was someone who just was never happy sober. I was always that person, they talk about the boy whistling in the dark, right? He wants a half a dozen drinks or whatever. Like that, I'd be that person on vacation just hoping the bartender would make a mistake. And I'd order a non-alcoholic drink and just praying they'd screw it up. Just give me a reason. Give me any reason. Because I wasn't okay. And then I go through these steps and I get this God and I have this spiritual experience and I'm comfortable in my own skin for the very first time. Always. Right? Always now. I'm always comfortable in my own skin. If that was the only promise I got aside from not drinking, that'd be enough. Because you go through your life so uncomfortable, so filled with fear. 100 forms of fear. Fear of everything. Fear of what everyone thinks. Fear of, people's opinions. What are they thinking about me? Fear of not being good enough, right? I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this enough. I'm not that enough, right? Nothing's enough. And then all of a sudden, God fills that hole and everything's enough and everything's okay. And I don't want to drink. And I get all these other promises, and some of them took a little longer than others, and not having a fear of economic insecurity. That's huge. I used to just rule. It was just so loud. Everything was always so loud as an alcoholic. And then I have this spiritual experience because of this relationship with a God. And it gets quiet. And it gets okay. And I become useful because I can help another alcoholic. Right? So all that stuff, all those things I did, all those, nightmares of nights, of the waking up, of all that stuff, all of a sudden, I'm useful to the next woman. So I can say, I did that too. And this is what happened. I can help other people to, recover. We're uniquely qualified. We're uniquely qualified to help other alcoholics. And not only are we uniquely qualified, I think what a lot of this was about is that I'm responsible, right? I have a responsibility to pass on the program of Alcoholics Anonymous as it's laid out in the big book and as it was created, by God and Bill and Bob and Ebby and Silkworth and Parkhurst and Fitzmayo and Carl Jung and all those people, right? And what did Dr. Bob say? Don't screw it up. Right? Don't screw it up, Bill. Like the same thing for us. Don't screw it up. Keep the program as it is. It works just fine. Is that my time? Yeah, that's good? Because I think leaving it as it works just fine is a good ending.
I think so too. Kristine. Thank you so much.